Hello and welcome to this session on Manavutsav. And in this session, as you know, that of course we had the previous session on postnatal depression, and we went through the Roshni 2 project. In this one, we are going to take a more kind of a creative angle, and this is kind of a very innovative sort of discussion that we are planning here, and we're trying to talk through it. We have got Harshit Agarwal joining from us, who has recently, and his exhibitions are running here in Leicester as well, and of course he's going to take us through that and all of it. But yeah, so this session is going to be on how we can use artificial intelligence um, in creative endeavors and arts and artificial intelligence. And I'm not very accustomed to the field, I must admit, but I'm trying to learn from Harshit, and he has been doing a great exhibition here, which we have all gone through and we have seen, but we will learn more about it from him. And then we have got Soma Mitra, who is an artist, and she has got her own organization, Blue Palette, in Mumbai. So she and Abhishek Mitra, who is also working in the field of artificial intelligence, and both of them joining us today. So we are looking forward to the discussion. But over to you, Harshit, first to take us through the deep dream kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Indrani. Let me actually start sharing my screen and sort of, can you guys see my screen now?
Not yet, but
Okay.
yes, I have. Yeah, I've had it.
It's visible. Is the screen visible now? Hello.
Yes, it is visible. Sorry, I took myself off backstage.
So is the screen visible? Am
Yes,
I
yes.
audible? Okay, great.
You're audible,
Yeah.
it's visible, yeah?
Okay, great.
Fantastic.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you, Indrani, for having me here. And I briefly want to talk about my work as an artist working with artificial intelligence, machine learning to create art or to explore the domain of creative expression. And I mean, uh, as the presentation progresses, sort of, it'll unpeel some of the themes that I work with, but if there were two umbrella sort of themes that guide my work, it's mainly sort of looking at AI as a form that allows for an entirely new form of creative expression, and something that I term as sort of human machine creativity continuum, where the locus of creativity sort of uh, is merged or spread across human and machine, and not necessarily using machine only as a tool to just carry out an artist's vision end to end. So there is that back and forth which happens almost like a conversation with the machine to create art. And the second is obviously sort of the idea that we live in a world immersed in technology, and technology that is becoming more and more intelligent by the day. So how can we use that technology itself to sort of offer a commentary on what technology means for our society? So yeah, beginning with some of the works. This is a piece called Flying Pantograph, which is not purely AI in that sense, but more sort of robotic, human robot interface kind of a program, where what essentially is happening is uh, a drone has this a marker pen attached to it, and that is mimicking the motions of the human hand on the table here. And the drone is essentially acting as this extended hand of yours, in the sense uh, of augmenting your innate sort of physical capabilities to go beyond what the limits of your body allow, and sort of be able to express at completely remote locations or far off locations. And The other interesting thing of this is obviously also that the drone is creating this work on a particular surface, and there is sort of physics involved in terms of the friction that the drone is generating, etc., which forces the artist or the human person to sort of also adapt a little bit to how the drone is moving, and ultimately uh, come into this sort of mutual sort of space where you are both directing the drone but also taking some feedback from it, and then ultimately uh, making making some outputs. And Sorry, yeah, moving on to the next sort of segment of projects, which is more core AI. I was um, deeply inspired by sort of work that came out of Google called the Deep Dream Project. And I think a lot of contemporary AI artists sort of started probing more deeply into AI and its creative uses after seeing these very abstract, very different, strange kind of visuals. And Yeah, so one of the first works that I did with AI in the AI art space, particularly, was sort of this work called Tandem, which draws from the Deep Dream project. So what happens here is it's a regular drawing software. So you draw something like the image on the left, and then sort of hit an imagine button, and what happens is the machine reinterprets your drawing to add more structure and meaning to it, or more composition to it. So for example, this feather that most of us would think of as sort of an ink pen, or a pen sort of dipped in an ink bottle, becomes this bird kind of augmented drawing from the computer's end. So the idea is essentially the computer, trained on millions of images, tries to identify some parameters that are that sort of make it feel like it's something from that learned space. So it feels like this is a bird, and sort of creates that bird. And here, for example, it takes this input, which maybe most of us might think of as sort of leafless trees in some kind of a deserted land, but the computer very interestingly imagines dogs with large ears here, which and this sort of hints at that idea of the machine not only being used to sort of fine tune your drawings, or just make your lines more straight or something, but it's actually adding its own imaginative content into the creation pipeline. And this is a video of how this system works. So yeah, you draw something, you hit this imagine button, and the machine basically reinterprets your drawing. And here, let's say, these scribbles that you created on the left got imagined as some kind of a car and birds and so on. So yeah, just sort of going back and forth with the machine, and then you could add to that drawing or delete some parts, etc. Yeah, so the other this was more about sort of machines using kind of object detection or perception kind of models to add creative insights into something that you made. The other set of projects are more about using this machine learning framework called generative adversarial networks, where the idea is very simply put, can machines learn uh, from a given data set of something? For my case, I work with images, but it could be text or music or whatnot. So given some kind of an input data, can the machine learn to create more of that using this framework called GANs, which is um, uh, in some sense not very complicated. There is essentially two computer algorithms, you can say, or two networks. One that is trying to generate new data, which looks like the training data, and the one that is trying to sort of guess if the input it's getting is computer generated or it's coming directly from the training data. And initially, sort of the generator generates kind of gibberish stuff, and this discriminator easily distinguishes between real and fake or generated. And over time, so the generator improves itself so that the discriminator is not able to actually guess if the generated image, if the image it's seeing is generated or from the training set. And at that point, sort of the generator produces images that are like the training set itself. Um, so to draw like a analogy in terms of more traditional forms of art and AI art, how I think of it is also this, like this image captures that, is essentially data or some kind of data set becomes the raw material for the creation process, and which is like sort of the paint of traditional art, and the algorithms you use to sort of manipulate that data is like the paintbrush that you would use to sort of paint from paint, right? So yeah, this analogy helps sort of think in terms of what AI art means today. And one project that sort of exemplifies that quite nicely is this work I did last year called Strange Genders, where uh, the idea was to collect these hand drawings from various sorts of people of India, about 2,300 drawings of the prompt given to them was draw a standing female form and draw a standing male form. And these hand drawings were used to then train that GAN system. Like these became the data set to train that generative adversarial network system to generate these. These are all computer generated uh, representations of human form. And yeah, yeah. And then what those GAN outputs were used was, like those GAN outputs were then passed through a classification network. So the classification network was essentially something that, like a computer network that was trained to either given an input image, say if it's a female image or a male image, and this was trained on the original data set that we collected. So this classification network essentially captures what people of India sort of think in terms of what is male and what is female. And the classification network classifies with some probability score. Like I think that this is 80% male drawing. So we pass the GAN outputs, which are machine generated outputs, through this classifier to sort of generate this spectrum of gender representations in some sense, ranging from images that were classified as 100% female to sort of 0% female, and put them out in terms of this circular mandala like structure. And this essentially, yeah, this process, like you would have seen, sort of captures this idea of generating or creating a new data set which becomes the raw material for using an AI algorithm to sort of paint from or create imagery from. And also, there's another interesting thing within this, which is the notion of AI enabling a new form of art, in the sense, one which allows to use data and sort of create this generic representation of what people think of some concept. So probing at that, I think, is very interesting from the AI lens. Um, this is actually the work that is at what Indrani mentioned at Leicester, currently being displayed. And this work is drawn in. What happens here essentially is a person stands in front of a TV screen, and their faces are transformed into two dance rituals from southern India, the faces of these dancers, Kathakali and Thayyam. And what the piece is essentially trying to do, or yeah, as this is video is playing, I can talk through it. What the piece is trying to do is Thayyam is to talk about the like identities that you see yourself as. So using AI, can you sort of create a space to view yourself in multiple identities simultaneously? Both like Thayyam, for example, is a male form, and Kathakali is a female form. So you see yourself across these two genders, and then also traditionally Thayyam was performed by sort of tribal people or the lower caste, what is called the lower caste people in India, and Kathakali was reserved for sort of the upper caste people. And now you're sort of breaking those boundaries and seeing both these, seeing yourself as both these at the same time. So this is the same piece sort of when I'd shown it in India once, and here's someone sort of interacting with that. So yeah, you should check it out if you're in town, and it's part of this festival, and the installation is at Haymarket. Yeah, and there is also apart from this interactive work, there is also some 2D static images that I've created as part of this series, where the idea is to work with masks of India and then use an AI to sort of reimagine them. And the last piece that I want to show is this theme of tech art being the commentary in itself of technology and society today, and how sort of technology is maybe shifting the aspect of agency or control between humans and machines. So here, this is basically a handwriting system where someone starts writing something like, yeah, for example, they write something like human is, and then at some point the machine takes control of their hand and starts moving that. So you just hold the pen, and there is a magnetic system under the table that is attracting the tip of the pen to move it in terms of using the human as almost a mechanical arm to write what the machine is thinking. So yeah, in the backend sort of, yeah, if there is human writing that gets recognized by the system, by the machine, which becomes input text for a text generating AI to sort of generate text and then convert the text that it has generated or it has thought of into handwriting again, and then sort of use the human hand to continue that writing. So writings like these are what come out. So for example, the human started writing freedom of man is, and then the machine wrote a myth, who is a moral and a nice person of the state to say the truth. So yeah, some sort of the machine generating text generating system was trained on philosophy books, so it generates these sort of slightly meta kind of outputs. So these were sort of a sample representation of works that I wanted to show, and there is yeah, I mean, there's more of AI works on sort of my social media handles or website, and I'm always happy to have conversations around this theme. I'll stop here and uh, yeah, stop sharing my screen. And I don't know if you're doing questions right away or thoughts, comments right away or later.
We're just doing it now. I guess. I mean,
Okay.
it's a very interesting one. So, of course, I mean, I'll come in with some of the questions just to start with, more generally. So, what you're doing in all of these, when we are looking into AI, say, for example, machine learning and artificial intelligence, there is this whole question of ethics. And what comes in is that if a machine can control my hand and let me write what it thinks, now that machine has been programmed by another human, isn't it? So it's not that the machine has learned all by itself, but it's actually a human input. So the machine here is actually working as an interface between two human beings and their collective thoughts, or the kind of ethical. So if one of them have got some kind of ethical problem, or some of the organizations who wants to extract some of the things that they will find useful for them, there's a huge ethical concern there. Now, as an artist in AI, how do you see that addressing in the future? I mean, I know it's a difficult one in the sense that, I'm not expecting you to kind of come and say, well, this is the solution. But what I'm saying is that as a creative person, you must have thought about it. And
Yeah.
what have been your thoughts, if you just let us know that?
Yeah. No, this is definitely a super relevant and very, I think, probably one of the most important sort of themes to ponder over within the AI space. And actually, this writing work is in a lot of ways a response to this thought process itself, where you are sort of being led into certain directions by certain kinds of companies that have larger interests than probably your own personal interest, and without you realizing that, right? So right now, let's say you're shopping on some e-commerce platform and you have recommendations or whatnot, or ads and stuff like that. Those are sort of influencing your behavior, and probably pushing you into directions that you wouldn't have gone into otherwise. And what this writing piece tries to do is to take that loss of agency to an extreme level by making it physical control, like loss of physical control to a machine, so that people start thinking more about their own agency when interacting with AI technologies. So this is a work to actually get people to start reflecting on that more seriously, because when it only happens in sort of a touch screen or a very software level, you don't generally sort of realize that it's happening. But if your hand itself is starting to be controlled by something else, in such a simplistic sort of subjective task, then maybe you start thinking more deeply about it. And what is interesting, one thing that I quickly also comment is, when we've shown this authorized work at different sort of art festivals and venues, I generally sort of ask people if that piece of paper belongs to them, like it's their work, their writing, or not. And then most of people sort of say, yeah, it is their piece of writing, whereas they have spent most of the time just holding a pen and not doing much beyond that. So that sort of notion of humans still thinking that they are at the center of control in terms of all interactions that happen with a machine, that is something that this work also tries to sort of poke at, through this slightly extreme narrative. Uh, and I think, as an AI artist, I mean, beyond such provocations, obviously the idea is to also uh, use probably art with made with AI as a, yeah, as a beginning, as a conversation beginner in some sense, where people look at these things and then they realize, oh, this is like, what is, how is it made? There is sort of a data set involved. How is that data collected? What is sort of uh, the analogous to this data collection, etc., in my own life, and then maybe be a little more conscious of how their data is being used. Yeah, I don't know if that directly answers your question, but these are, yeah, some of the art ways in which trying to at least create conversations around this, if not answer the
No,
questions
it does.
directly.
It does. Thank you very much. No, it does. I mean, I know that there isn't a straight answer because it kind of depends upon the subject area as well, isn't it? So, whether an artist, as an artist, you are using AI, or as a computer scientist, like you are using AI, is going to make a huge difference, or
Yeah.
someone else who is in some other business. So, it's the use actually. I mean, it's the, if I give the knife analogy, it's the same thing, isn't it? So you can cut onions and you can risk lives as well. So it just depends how you use it. No, that's really good. But another thing, just in connection to that, is that you said that you have collected 23,000 data that went into that mandala piece that you created. So do you
2300, 2300.
2300, yes, yeah. So do you think that the more data that you collect, the variations will be more? Because I was experimenting, because I was interested, and I thought, well, I don't want to sound dumb when I come and interact with you tomorrow. So I looked up a few of the works and all of that, and I thought, well, let me see what it is all about very nicely. And I saw that there are some applications, and I tried to put my face, and then they said, well, do you want to look like Marilyn Monroe? And I said, yeah, why not? And I tried that. So it changed me into some colors of pink and yellows and, all of that. And then there was another one which said that, do you want to go into 1920s or 1940s, and different. I said, yeah, why not? Take me. And then both of them were quite different. Some had lots of splashes of color, and they were kind of, I don't know whether they were collecting under that theme lots of images from where they got those variations and colors, or how does this work? So the more you put, the more you get specific, or
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's the correct interpretation. That uh, the more data you have, the closer the system sort of gets to learning the distribution of that data set, or by distribution meaning sort of what that data set contains. So if you're trying to, let's say, generate, paintings of, I don't know, let's say landscapes, then if you give it 1,000 landscapes versus 10,000 landscapes, with 10,000 landscapes, I mean, given that those 10,000 landscapes within themselves are not very diverse, are of a certain sort of similarity range, then the machine will be able to produce landscapes of that kind more easily if it was just trained on 1,000 landscapes. So yeah, it does start to get more specific with more data. But it also, yeah, there is, I think, that sort of balance between uh, like what your purpose is. Like if you want to sort of explore the diversity of, let's say, uh, gender, then you want to gender representations, then you want to sort of ensure your data set is not just one kind of drawings also. Like you want, I mean, you don't force that to happen, because here you're genuinely interested in seeing what people think or visually feel of gender. But the exciting thing is that, yeah, within 2300 drawings itself, there was enough of a range of sort of drawings that people did, that when the machine was trained on that, it it generated a nice sort of spectrum of visual representations of gender for us. So yeah, there is no real, like, this number is the golden number or something. It really boils down to what you're trying to sort of probe at in some sense.
thank you. Now I'll pass it over to Shoma and Abhishek there.
Yeah, hi Harshit. It's Abhishek. Uh, First of all, accept our compliments. Quite innovative work that you have done. So I have a couple of questions for you. First one is with related to your work that you have done in tandem. So what I understood is you took some random geometries and then you converted them into something which is very real. Can you do the opposite? So if I give you some real images, can you identify the underlying geometries?
Yeah, that is also, sorry, I think there is some level of, yeah, now it's, yeah, that is also quite possible. What what we can do is sort of yeah, just reverse the process in some sense, where what the question would become that given this as sort of the final image, can you go the other way and generate an input which when fed through that pipeline will generate this output. That can be done, and I mean, the in some sense I think uh, the thing that I was interested in with tandem was, can very random inputs sort of become something meaningful or something interesting, which you would not have considered, but the machine is able to sort of consider by how it looks at those inputs. The other way would be interesting if there is some sort of constraint in terms of the aesthetics that can be imposed. Like, uh, can you think of this form from just the constraints of uh, let's say only squares and rectangles and triangles or something? So can you sort of break a complex form into something, some sort of input which is very simplistic, reductionist in some sense, but has a certain aesthetic constraint to it, so that you get something aesthetically meaningful out of that. um, Otherwise, yeah, just generating random scribbles uh, could be interesting, but yeah, it might not result in something very meaningful.
So I'll just be bit more clear. So I am not asking you to generate random scribbles. So what I want is, if I give you an image, can you get the underlying geometry of that particular object or the element? So it becomes more of a caricature kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that is definitely possible. You can go towards sort of simplifying a particular input, while maybe sort of, yeah, you can put in a constraint that you keep simplifying it till the point that the computer vision system still recognizes that as what it originally recognized as sort of the input object. So let's say whatever you take, a an image of a car and sort of trees and whatnot, and you, instead of all the complex lines, can you keep simplifying it to a point, till the point that it breaks in terms of its recognition that this was a car, this was a tree, etc. So that is definitely possible. There are sort of these simplification algorithms. If there is a particular style of caricature you want to convert that drawing into, there is something called image to image translation algorithms that exist, that don't break out of that system of aesthetic that you're working with, but sort of within that generate, or within that sort of convert one kind of drawing input to another. The mask work that I showed sort of uses that process, where essentially the outlines of a human face, uh, like the system is trained to go from outlines to that Kathakali or Thayam model. And yeah, so that sort of training of A/B pairs of images can also be done if we have that training data set, uh, to convert, yeah, from A to B.
Yeah, actually that actually answers my second question. So the mask part. So
Okay, great.
that's okay. So I'll get in touch with you. I have something in my mind, which is not very concrete as of now, but I'll work with you in getting something out of it. I think it's a very
Yeah,
helpful tool. Yeah.
sure.
Harshit, I have a question. Like as Indrani was pointing out, so being an artist, you're an artist, and also you are exploring the technology part of art. So, what is the what is the end purpose? Like, what do you think? Like, it will help? Like, except just a new arena of for artists. So, for the art's sake, how what will be the purpose of this kind of art come intelligence?
Yeah, yeah. So definitely, like one thing that you mentioned is this curiosity or sort of urge to create new forms of art, that like experiences like that interactive experience where you stand in front of a screen and you as the audience is the art, like your face sort of drives the artwork. So experiences like that probably have a different impact than sort of static non-interactive works that you see. So definitely one large motivation is to explore new kinds of art that can be made. But beyond that, I think the larger motivation is to sort of yeah, a sort of break out from this notion of what for lots of years we've defined as sort of the constraints of the human body or the human mind itself, and use something that can augment that, like technology that can augment that process, so that you're not limited to just your own physical capabilities or your own imaginative capabilities, but you're really sort of spreading that across yourself and the machine, and using this then as a means to yeah, also like I mentioned, sort of comment on how or what, like these themes that Indrani brought up of what ethics of using AI systems means, because we're all surrounded by all these technology systems today. There is no escaping that. So, can the art of our times sort of probe at those themes? And the best way to do that is to use that medium itself, that technology itself, to sort of probe at those questions. So, yeah, those things are, I think, what motivate me or become the seeds of thoughts for creating these works.
Yeah, thank you. Like that answers my question. I like that one very much. Like where you are showing a few branches of tree and the machine completely thought of something completely different, like the dogs. It came up with the dogs as the form. So I'm just curious. Was that the only art piece which the computer which the system gave you back, or was there multiple of them and you chose one of it?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So the machine, like to get into a little more detail of the process for that, there are certain like parameters I can choose of the system uh, to sort of come up with an output, and if I choose one set of out parameters, then yeah, that is the one outcome that will come out. But I could have chosen a different set of parameters, and the machine is iteratively sort of generating the form, and based on some like layer which essentially determines what level of detail I want, I can choose different levels of abstractions or figurative outputs, and then generate different outputs from that same input drawing. So it essentially is like a playground for me as an artist to sort of keep changing knobs off and dialing stuff to get different kinds of outputs from that. So yeah, that dog output is not necessarily the only output that the machine will generate from that input drawing. Yeah. It almost becomes like a material essentially that you're playing with, like this AI algorithm, and then you keep sort of trying different properties of that material to get different kinds of outputs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting thing. Very, very innovative, I must say. So,
Thank you.
I mean, I'll pick up on Suma's comments there. I mean, it's been fascinating as I was discussing this with some of the schools here I work with, and I was talking about, okay, so if you want to say, for example, talk about motion, can you actually teach motion by actually using AI, and embedding that in the curriculum, and I was thinking, well, will it be much more easier for children to learn from the textbooks, or to learn from something which can be demonstrated before their eyes, so rather than you grabbing a book and mugging up everything, you're then just actually going and looking into something which can ignite your curiosity, and you find something in there that you want to apply in your future life. And that's the kind of conversation possibly we are going to have in the future. And it's been interesting, and it's fascinating work that you're doing, honestly, Harshit. And I believe that there is a research project there that we can work up together, as I have told you before as well, where we will be definitely looking into whether we can work with the schools to see that there's certain part of it that can be done. But also there is a scope for teaching, more kind of a wider population, to educate them on using this scientific knowledge to then apply on creative endeavors.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that is also one of my sort of large interests, is to see how to sort of take this work and get other people to get some kind of interest in this subject, and then explore that further, because like you mentioned, like Abhishek mentioned, that it is the reality of our times, and right now there is quite a bit of gap between you using this technology and you understanding, at least at some level, what is happening with this technology. So that gap definitely needs to be bridged for people to have more nuanced sort of conversations around this technology, how it's impacting them, how it's being sort of, it's interfacing with their daily lives, etc. So definitely, I think that's very important and relevant.
Okay, on that note, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for your time. I know that you had some emergency issues and we had to actually postpone the event. But what we are going to do actually with this event is, like, we are not actually looking for live interactions often, but we are creating this as educational content that can then be shared with our stakeholders, with our partners who aim to develop something in the future. So thank you very much for enriching us and giving us and sharing your knowledge in this field. And thank you very much to Shoma and Abhishek for joining us and giving their time, valuable time, of course. And it's quite late there as well, isn't it? So I'll leave you guys to get on with your dinner and spare time, and then
yeah, like so on,
we'll catch up sometime
to be
soon.
here. It was a pleasure. Thank you,
Thank you,
Harshit.
likewise, and yeah,
And
apologies again for getting a little bit late
yes,
on
and
this,
Shoma
but
is
it
also.
is very interesting.
Thank you. Yes, yeah. And Shoma is doing a session on the 24th. Drawing in circles, and she's very much into drawing and the therapeutic approach that she's taking at the moment. So it's more kind of drawing in circles to stress relief. So looking forward to that session as well. So thank you very much again. And it's very nice to see you all here. Thank you very much for Manav itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.